In this video, we're going to talk about the number one thing that will determine your business success as a coach. Now, obviously, if you don't do the number one thing that's going to determine your success, well, it's going to be really, really hard to succeed. I'm going to dissect this and break down how your response to the coronavirus will determine whether you succeed in business. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Sean Smith, and I've been coaching for over 15 years. We've made millions and millions of dollars in this industry. And one of the most critical things you have to understand about business is how to pivot according to what the world or what the market or what the industry or what your clients are doing. That's what we'll be breaking down in this video. Now, make sure you stick around to the end, not just to get the entire conversation, but especially the 4 behavioral drivers that are the active ingredients in the success of your business. Let me say that this discussion is not whether or not your business will survive during this coronavirus period of time. That's a whole nother discussion, like how you respond during this time, whatever. But what I'm talking about is whether you have the right mindset of an entrepreneur is being revealed right now for most people by how they're responding to coronavirus. And people are responding in a bunch of different ways, right? Some people trust the government and their statements and what they're telling us and the actions that they're taking, and some people absolutely don't. Some people are being 100% defiant, and some people are in complete cooperation and they're living in isolation right now and social distancing. Some people are adjusting well to staying home and all the things that society is doing, and some people are in full-blown panic mode, right? And of course, there's all kinds of points in between all of those ends of the spectrum, all of those extremes. So this isn't a discussion about the correctness of any of that. We're not talking about the virus and about the spread and flattening the curve and all those things that are on the public's tongue and in the public's minds right now. I'm not trying to deal with any of that. I'm not trying to make fun of a serious situation. I just want to look at the elements that are being revealed right now underneath the surface of the responses and how those elements are actually the exact same elements that will determine whether you succeed or fail. Oh, I just touched my face, not supposed to do that. Whether you succeed or fail as an entrepreneur. And this is a huge realization that I had yesterday, and it was shocking how parallel these elements actually are. Like, what's creating the responses over here is what's also creating success or failure as entrepreneurs. And what I'm most interested about when it comes to things like what's happening in our world right now with coronavirus is the public response to it. The individual response, yes, but the public response also. And our responses to the things that we can't control are ultimately going to determine our experience of life. And that's life in general, not just in a situation like this. So I've identified 4 behavioral drivers that are being revealed right now for the way that people are responding to coronavirus, and the same behavioral drivers that will determine whether you succeed or not in business. So let's first talk about the situation in the world. We've got this worldwide pandemic. The health organizations are making all kinds of declarations and they're sharing things. You got all kinds of people that are spreading stuff on social media. And so one of the behavioral drivers is our need for certainty. Inside of all of this, what's going on around us, there are so many things that we don't actually know for sure. There are a lot of conflicting reports, a lot of conflicting opinions, and we don't know the exact number of actual cases. We don't know the exact number of people infected. We don't know who's contagious. We don't really truly know the speed of the outbreak. And we certainly don't know anything about the future. We don't know what the disease is going to do itself. We don't know how many people are going to die. We don't know how many are going to be infected. We don't know how long the restrictions are going to last. We don't know what life is going to be like during the phase or after the phase, if we're going to recover. Ultimately, we don't know if we're going to make it. If we go all the way down to the survival fears, we don't know if we're going to make it, especially entrepreneurs. There are a lot of businesses that are going to be massively affected because when people are in this place of fear and not knowing what's going to happen and their income is at stake, then a lot of times people are hoarding their money. We see a lot of people cashing out of the stock market right now. And a lot of those people may decide to stop supporting or stop purchasing items, services that a lot of us depend on them purchasing. So like me, for instance, I'm in the personal development world. Historically, at least, a lot of people have stopped buying personal development programs and products when there's this mass fear around money. So I don't know what's going to happen in my business, and restaurants obviously are being shut down, bars, so much of our population, at least in the Western world that I'm aware of, but I know around the world as well, so much of the restrictions are hitting small businesses. And so we don't know literally if we're going to make it. We don't know if the business is going to make it. We don't know if we as people are going to make it if our businesses fail, and that's our source of income. So we've got this massive amount of uncertainty around the virus itself and how it's ultimately going to affect us. The second behavioral driver is safety and risk. How do we define and how do we relate to safety and risk? So what does safety mean in terms of, and I'm still talking about the virus and all of that. I'm going to talk about business here in a moment. But as it relates to the virus and the outbreak and everything that the world is doing, what does safety even mean in terms of protection, in terms of isolation and social distancing? And what's the risk of attending events or going to the gym or going to restaurants? What if I get the virus? Am I going to be okay? What if a family member gets the virus? What if somebody that I know gets the virus? And ultimately, that all traces back to the same question of, are we going to make it? Right? I mean, our safety is really dependent on survival and our desire to survive. So when we're playing the safety game, we're essentially trying to not die. So if we trace all of that down, it's going to be another version of, will we make it? The third behavioral factor is the need for the right answer. And it's based on safety and it's based on certainty that I've already talked about. But a lot of people are asking, what should I do? What should we as a family do? What should we as an organization do? Should we shut down? Should we stay open? What's the right response in my situation? And if we're concerned about making the right choice, then we're really concerned about making the wrong choice. So what if we make the wrong choice? And again, if we trace that all the way down, it leads us to, will we make it, right? If we make the wrong choice, will we make it? Will we survive? And the fourth behavioral driver here is the need for the approval of non-experts, the need for the opinions to match ours. So in the case of the coronavirus, if I share my opinion on social media, what will they think of me? If I don't isolate, will they think I'm selfish? Will they think I'm disrespectful and I don't care about the older people or the super young people or the people with immune compromised systems? Will they think that I don't care about the vulnerable folks? If I do isolate, will people judge that I'm just living in fear and I'm succumbing to all of the media panic? And ultimately, it comes down to the same question, will we make it? But this one is not so much based on survival, it's based on emotional okayness or emotional survival, right? Will we make it in the eyes of other people? Will I still be okay if other people don't agree with my choices, particularly in this situation? So those four behavioral drivers are essentially causing people to respond the way they're responding inside of the coronavirus. Now let's take those same four behavioral drivers and let's move them into the conversation around entrepreneurship. So as entrepreneurs, we have to heal our relationship to these four things. We can't get rid of the need for certainty. We can't get rid of the need for safety. We can't get rid of what's required as an entrepreneur, but we have to heal our relationship to them if we're going to succeed. So there's a mindset that's much more critical than the strategies and the skills that most entrepreneurs are searching for. It's the mindset that's going to determine whether we succeed or not. And with the wrong mindset, the right strategies and the right skills won't save you in business. Now, again, I'm not talking about in this coronavirus period of time. I'm talking about in business in general. So the behavioral drivers that are being revealed right now are going to determine success or failure in your business. So let's go back through those same four behavioral drivers. The first one is certainty. If you need to know the future, you are literally walking a deadly path in entrepreneurship. It's going to mean death to your business. It's going to mean death to your enjoyment of business. It's going to mean death to your joy. It's going to mean death to your decision making. It will mean death to your business if you need to know the future. As an entrepreneur, we have to make decisive actions. We have to be bold in the face of uncertainty. We can't avoid uncertainty, but we have to be bold in the face of uncertainty. And what most people do is they use uncertainty as a reason to not make a decision. But making no choice in business is worse than making the wrong choice, because the pattern of making no choice means your business will never grow and you can't succeed. But the pattern of making wrong choices is okay. There's nothing wrong with that in business as long as you learn from the wrong choices. So if you find yourself needing to know what's going to happen in the future based on your choices, you cannot win as an entrepreneur, because you're expecting something that's literally impossible. You're expecting certainty to be delivered to you from the future, and that's impossible because we're dealing with people, choices, circumstances. 4 months ago, nobody had any idea about this virus. Nobody could have predicted something that was going to happen the way it happened and how quick it was going to take hold of the whole world. None of that stuff can be predicted. So there are so many factors that are out of our control. You cannot expect yourself to have certainty around things that are inherently uncontrollable. Now, of course, you can be prepared. You can take calculated risks. I'm not saying you just have to be careless in business. You can learn from other people's choices, other people's actions. You can get coaching from people. You can get mentors. You can mitigate the risks as much as possible with preparation, but you cannot know the future, and you cannot remove risk entirely from the essence of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a way for us to create a freedom that's not available in a lot of our endeavors in terms of our employee relationships, meaning we can get jobs, but those jobs bring certainty to us, but sacrifice the freedom. They sacrifice the income potential a lot of times. So a lot of entrepreneurs go after the freedom of entrepreneurship, but they don't ever obtain the mind. They don't ever create the right mindset of being an entrepreneur. So they hold on to the same need for safety that's embedded in being an employee. They hold on to that same need and they hope it transfers over here as an entrepreneur. And the ability for freedom comes with it the requirement for risk. If you want to get rid of the risk, you can do it over here as an employee, but you have to trade in the ability to grow as quickly or as big as you can as an entrepreneur. So it's two sides of the fence, and you have to decide you're either all in over here or you're all in over here. But what most people are trying to do is hold on to their need for certainty while trying to build a business that requires risk. And you just can't ever do it. So then the second behavioral driver that I talked about is safety as it relates to risk. And I think there are three main fears that are relevant to this conversation. Physical fear, emotional fear, and financial fear. Now, the physical fear usually is not a big issue as an entrepreneur. Most people are not afraid of taking action in their business because they're literally going to die. So that is generally not relevant as an entrepreneur. However, most people approach their fears and respond to fears as though all fears are survival in nature. All fears are mortally dangerous. It's because our body responds to fear in an over-exaggerated way to keep us hyper safe. So even though consciously and intellectually, a lot of us understand that if we make a choice in business, if we invest $5,000 for a coach or for marketing or something, we know intellectually that we won't actually die. But our bodies respond to risk as though it's a life or death situation more often than we are aware of at a deeper emotional level. So even though this isn't consciously and rationally relevant, the way a lot of people, I would say most people, respond to fear is as though every fear is a physical danger to their life. And that's why people fall into panic mode so much quicker around things that don't require panic or don't even have any kind of like mortal threat at all, but you feel the tension in your body, you feel the fear like take over and almost make you unavailable or unable to think rationally. That's because the body is responding to a threat that's not a physical threat as though it is a physical threat, and you're just trying to stay alive. The second fear, I'm going to go out of order from what I said before. The second fear is financial safety. Now, financial safety is a very real fear in business because that's part of the game, right? Nearly all businesses will struggle with financial security and financial safety. I mean, most businesses go out of business. So if 95% or so of businesses eventually fail, well, then obviously all of those businesses have financial problems. But even the ones that survive, some point in time, almost all of them are going to have financial conflict. So if you expect your business to never have financial crunches, it's a ridiculous expectation. It's something that I struggled with for a long, long time. And it wasn't until many, many years afterwards, talking to other people that are in business, have been in business longer than I have, that I realized this is just the nature of entrepreneurism. This is the nature of building a business. And even when your business becomes stable and you go to another level, there will be new financial stresses up there. There will be new financial conflicts and tensions. So finances inside of a business is always going to be an issue. It's critical that we don't demand of ourselves that we're never in financial trouble, because our fear of getting into financial trouble when financial trouble is almost guaranteed for almost all businesses. Now, ideally, it's not an absolute requirement for 100%, but for almost all businesses, it is almost. So if we're expecting us to be able to avoid the thing that almost all businesses will come up against, especially when we don't have this 20 years of business acumen, then we're just putting way too much pressure on ourselves. And that pressure is actually going to guarantee that we create a lot of the stress and a lot of the conflict and a lot of the failures that we're trying to avoid. So if you're demanding of yourself and of your business to never have money conflict, and it's coming from a place of shame and coming from like a place of emotional threat, like you better not have any money conflict, then you can't win as an entrepreneur. Again, you have to heal your relationship to the idea of money conflict and your response to money tensions and money pressures rather than try to avoid it altogether. And that's a mindset shift. The third fear I mentioned is emotional safety. Now, I think this is the bigger issue that's tied to the financial safety. Most entrepreneurs have an unhealthy relationship to the success of their business based on their ego and their identity. And I've got both hands up and both legs up. This is the way I've operated for a long, long, long time. I've made massive strides over the last year and a half with the help of my business coach, but it still shows up every now and then where the amount that I have in my business bank account can easily determine how I feel about myself as a person. So if my business account is low, then I'm a crappy dad, I'm a terrible husband, I'm a loser as an entrepreneur, I'm not a leader, I'm not a good coach. But when the business account is high, then I'm all of the opposite of those things. And that's when I'm a great dad and I'm a great husband and I'm a real man because I got a lot of money in the bank. And that connection between your performance in business and your value as a person is massively unhealthy, again, because we'll just put so much pressure on ourselves to succeed in business and deal with a lot of the uncertainties that business requires when our self-esteem is on the line. If my identity as a person is tied to the performance of me as a business owner, then I'm in deep trouble. It's this common person and performance connection that is a massive problem for so many people, because if I win, then I feel like a winner. If I lose, then I feel like a loser. It's that personalization of the results of business that causes so many people to have the emotional problems that we have when it comes to just being an entrepreneur. So the emotional safety of who you are and your self-esteem is so critical to protect from the performance of your business. Most people have an unhealthy thing, and that's why most people are shut down when it comes to taking risks that are required in business. Because if I take a business risk, then I'm essentially taking a self-esteem risk. And anytime that we take a self-esteem risk, we're not going to want to. We don't ever want to put our self-esteem at risk. So if it's tied up inside our business choices, we are going to have a big problem. We're going to have a lot of pressure and tension and conflict, because anytime there's emotional risk, there's emotional resistance. And so many of us, again, myself included, we have way too much emotional well-being at stake in our business choices. And that causes us to make choices based on safety, based on all the fears, based on not feeling like we're good enough, based on needing to know the right answer. And that increases the likelihood that we're going to make the wrong choice when it comes to business, because we've got too many emotions wrapped up in it. Your emotion can fuel your business, but your emotion should not be the one that's making the strategy decisions in your business. So the third behavioral driver I mentioned is the need for the right answer. I've already alluded to this a little bit as it relates to certainty and as it relates to safety. If you have the fear of risk that I just talked about, the emotional risk, then you're going to need a guaranteed right answer to make sure that your self-esteem doesn't get trampled if your business choices are wrong, or if your business folds, or if your business is failing. Most people that have that unhealthy connection, they just demand to know the right answers. They just want people to just tell them what to do. Tell me exactly what to do to grow my business and I'll do it, I promise. That's an employee mentality. Tell me exactly what to do and I'll do it. That's an employee mentality. So that demand of being told what to do by somebody else who's not you and also can't predict the future is an employee demand inside of an entrepreneurial playground. And it can't ever happen that way. It's impossible to know the right answer because that requires you to predict the future. So you need to define right, in air quotes, as the best choice based on the information that's available to you right now. That should be your definition of the right choice in business, because you're dealing with so many variables and you can't know what's going to happen in the future. If new information gets revealed, or if the choice that you made doesn't turn out the way you want it to turn out, that doesn't make the choice, which was the best choice in the moment, that doesn't make the best choice in the moment wrong because it didn't turn out. And this is critical as an entrepreneur so that you don't keep carrying around any of the guilt or shame from your past decisions and bring those into your choices for the future. But it's also even more critical so that you remove what most people have, which is decision paralysis when it comes to anything that's potentially risky. Most people are so paralyzed around the decisions because they don't know the decision that they need to make that's going to be right based on all the guilt and shame from the past. Therefore, the pressure that they put on themselves to make the right choice now based on what they won't know is going to come in the future, that's paralyzing. And that's why so many people aren't bold with their decisions and they aren't decisive with their leadership. And being a business owner is as much about being a leader as it is about making the right strategic choices. Most strategic choices, if they turn out wrong, can be recovered from. But lack of boldness and lack of decision-making cannot be recovered from. That's the behavior pattern that's important to look at when it comes to your business. And then the fourth one here is the opinions of non-experts. When it comes to business, this happens everywhere, right? Because everybody's got an opinion, especially nowadays in the social media world where everybody literally has a media channel to dispense whatever opinions they have about anything. We're so quick to share our knee-jerk opinions with other people. But unless people are doing exactly what you're doing and they're living the exact lifestyle you want, they're probably a non-expert. Now, it doesn't mean, of course, that you can't get good advice and good opinions from coaches and mentors and other kinds of support groups and so forth. And it certainly doesn't mean that you can't learn ingredients from other people's recipes. But the people that are demanding to be told exactly what to do, they're following a recipe to a T, and then they get frustrated when the recipe that wasn't designed for them doesn't work out the way they want it to. Well, it's because you're following somebody else's recipe. You can take ingredients from a recipe, but don't follow somebody else's recipe. They are not you. Their business is not built around you. Their strengths are not the same as your strengths. Their fears are not the same as your fears. They probably don't have the same exact family as you do. They don't have the same upbringing as you do. Their goals and dreams are not the exact same as yours. If they're not the exact same, then you shouldn't be following their exact same recipe. But it's really difficult to do that if you're stuck on needing to know the right answer because you can't handle uncertainty and you can't handle all the risks that I talked about. But especially the people who aren't doing anything close to you, the people who aren't entrepreneurs at all, the people who've never been in business, a lot of times they're the ones that are the quickest to give you their opinions about what you should be doing, and more often than not, what you shouldn't be doing. This is all a function of the way they see risk and the way they see security. Now, friends and family a lot of times will give us their opinions based on them wanting us to be safe, but they're using their definitions of safety and their choices that they've made in the past in order to guide us. Sometimes we just have to love them for who they are and completely dismiss their unsolicited advice. But when we're caught up in all these things that I've already talked about, it's much easier for us to be susceptible to and vulnerable to the opinions of our friends and family. And especially, again, when they're not entrepreneurs, not only are they not entrepreneurs, they're not our target market. They don't have the life that you want to live. They probably won't ever buy the products that you're creating. They literally have nothing to do with the path that you're wanting to walk down, yet we really want them to approve of us. I mean, how many times do we make the least appropriate opinions the most valuable ones we listen to, or the ones that we're afraid of the most? We're afraid of the disapproval from a lot of the people that literally don't matter at all when it comes to our business. So being an entrepreneur requires you to do things that people won't agree with. Again, entrepreneurship is leadership, and it's more about being bold, it's more about being decisive than it is about making choices that everybody's going to agree with. I mean, think about it. What choice is even possible to make that everybody is going to agree with? There isn't one. You have to make the right choices with the information you have for you and know that a lot of people will disagree. So if you don't have the stomach for people to disagree with your choices and for them to tell you about it, then you can't win as an entrepreneur. So let me wrap this up and kind of put a bow on this conversation around what needs to be understood from an entrepreneurial standpoint. This is something that I'm going to start teaching a lot more about because these laws of entrepreneurship are, as I said earlier, they are the most important thing, way more important than strategies and skills. And there's a link in the description of the video, actually, if you want to get a download of the 9 irrefutable laws of entrepreneurship. Click the link in the description and we'll send you a download. This will eventually become a book and part of my message, because over the last couple of years, I've just recognized how critical it is to have the right mindset of an entrepreneur rather than to have the right strategies or the skills of an entrepreneur. So as an entrepreneur, if you want to play this game, it's winnable. You can succeed at it, but not with an employee mindset. You have to separate yourself from the fear of making the wrong choices, from the fear of being wrong. That's probably the most critical shift you have to make as an entrepreneur, because none of those right decisions are known ahead of time. So my advice to you is just take a look at the choices you make as non-emotional endeavors and opportunities. There are choices and there are outcomes. You make a choice and you get an outcome. You don't win or lose based on your choice. Your choice isn't right or wrong. It just produces outcomes. Whatever the choice is will produce an outcome. That outcome does not have any tie, any connection to your value as a person. That outcome does not increase or decrease your worthiness as a human. It's just an outcome that the choice produced. That's it. It's an opportunity to adjust, and it's an opportunity then to improve. And the more outcomes that don't match what you were hoping for, the more opportunities you have to learn, adjust, and improve. And this becomes an exponential cycle in both directions, meaning the quicker you produce outcomes that you weren't hoping for, the quicker you adjust and the quicker you improve, then that starts to feed off of itself and it becomes an exponential growth cycle. But the more you're afraid of outcomes that you weren't hoping for, that means the less learning you're doing, the less adjusting you're doing, and the less improving you're doing. And that also becomes an exponential cycle, but going in the opposite direction. It's more of a cycle of fear. And every time that we are falling back and retreating into the fear of being wrong, it makes the next choice even more pressurized. We have to be more right the next time to make up for all the wrong choices. You guys, you cannot win as an entrepreneur with that mindset. Being an entrepreneur requires the things that most of us are programmed to avoid and most of us are trying to avoid. It requires uncertainty. It requires risk. It requires choices that won't work out. It requires producing negative opinions of others. It requires the things that most people are trying to avoid. It requires the loss of time and energy and money. So many people are afraid of investing those things because they don't want to lose those things. Being an entrepreneur requires the loss. I'm putting that in air quote because it depends on how you look at it, whether you determine it a loss or not. But it requires the loss in terms of not getting back what you had hoped of time, of energy, of money investments. Without those losses, you can't gain wisdom to help you make the bigger choices later on down the path. It requires failure. Being in business requires the same failure that most of us are trying to avoid. Without the failure, you can't learn how to be bigger and better and make the choices that you need to make in the future, again, to continue growing. Being an entrepreneur requires tension. It requires stress. It requires conflict of emotions, of systems. Without all of that tension and conflict, you can't get stronger. That's the way that strength as an entrepreneur is produced, through the tension and through the conflict and the choices that you make during all of that. Being an entrepreneur requires resistance and it requires doubt. This might be the thing that kills most people off. The existence of doubt, because they think they shouldn't doubt themselves. They think they shouldn't doubt their choices. They think they shouldn't doubt whether something is going to work or not. You cannot be an entrepreneur with an unstable future, with an uncontrollable future, and not have doubt produced by this brain. This brain produces doubt anytime uncertainty is present. It's what it does. We cannot remove the existence of doubt or the production of doubt. We can only change our relationship to the doubt. Without that doubt, we can't have the new ideas that our bigger, better, brighter future requires us to have. So this mindset shift that I think is being revealed in the way that we're responding right now to the coronavirus are the shifts that are required to succeed in your business. Now, all I can tell you is this entrepreneurial mindset is only everything. It's only everything. Your positive mindset can absolutely overcome the negative choices. And I'm putting that in quotes, right? The things that don't work out. But the best strategy and the best skill set in the world, all the things that are supposed to work and the things that are right, cannot overcome an employee mindset trying to play the entrepreneurial game. Now, if you like this video, check out that video where I break down the honest and raw and real parts of the journey about how I became a successful life coach. But if we don't have our current circumstances disrupted, then there's no opportunity to build anything beyond our current comfort zone.